How's it going, Jack Tackers, and welcome back to another video for you guys. Today I'm going to be doing my review for episode 3 of The Last of Us, which was titled Long, Long Time, and wow, oh wow, a lot of people were hyping this episode up as like one of the best episodes that will probably come out this year for television, and definitely a lot of people were saying that this was apparently the best episode of the season. I heard a lot of that online. I heard a lot of people saying that, and I didn't know what to expect, so I kind of went in with low expectations. Really, all I knew is that obviously Bill and Frank were in this episode, Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett were going to be in this, and I love those actors, so it was going to be really exciting to see them in this show, and they carry this episode. And overall, my thoughts on this episode, whoa. It's pretty great. It was a pretty great episode. I really don't know if it's the best of the season because it's a different episode. I mean, it's very different. And I can guarantee you right now, this episode is not going to be for everybody. And I'm sure video game fans are probably going to despise this episode, to be honest, because it really is pretty much all new. I mean, none of this was in the video game for the most. I mean, there's definitely moments and whatever, but like a good chunk, the majority of this, I'm sure video game fans aren't going to be too pleased, or maybe they will be, but I'm sure some of them also will not be just too accepting of this episode. But me personally, who never actually played the video game and instead just watched YouTube Let's Plays of it, it's not the same thing, but, just knowing the general story, I don't have a too big of a problem with this. And again, I'm sure people who have played the video game might not have that big of a problem with this episode, but I still feel like this is a very, I don't want to say pretentious episode, but it's a very cinematic episode. It's very, it's cinema, man. And it doesn't really relate to the video game factor whatsoever. I mean, it is 100% just cinema. That doesn't really make any sense, but if you know what I'm trying to say, then thank you. But yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier, Murray Bartlett and Nick Offerman as Bill and Frank, I mean, they are magnificent in this episode. I mean, they're the main characters of this episode. They're great. Also, these two actors, mostly known for comedy, I really only know Murray Bartlett from White Lotus, which is a bit more of a comedic show. And obviously Nick Offerman's well known for comedy. I believe he's probably been in dramatic roles before, but I always remember him in like We're the Millers, which is one of my favorite movies, and that's a great comedy. And he's playing a super dramatic character, and of course there's bits of comedy here and there. The Arby's bit, it was so funny. They showed that in the trailer, and it was still funny watching it. And their relationship, Bill and Frank, is way more expanded upon in this episode compared to the video game, just from what I saw, again, YouTube Let's Plays. And, it's really beautiful stuff. This episode's really beautiful and heartbreaking and tragic, and there's pretty much every emotion in this. And they even throw that scene in where the Raiders come, and there's a little bit of action in that moment when the Raiders show up, and the electric fence is kind of electrocuting them in the fire and all that, and in the rain, it just looked amazing. Cinematography is just spectacular, but it's already been spectacular in this series so far. But this episode especially, I thought everything about this, it really was a fantastic episode. I mean, I just watched it, so I'm a bit scatterbrained, but the more I think about it, it's just magnificent stuff, to be honest. I mean, the performances, the cinematography, it almost felt like its own contained story, its own film, its own apocalyptic tale. I mean, it's just beautiful stuff, man, and it was great to see the basically entire story of Bill and Frank's relationship, starting all the way at the beginning of the outbreak, September 30th, 2003. They don't meet until, I think, 4 years later. The timeline is kind of, not confusing, but there's a lot of time skips in this episode. I think at one point it's like 4 years later, and then 3 years later, and then another 3 years later, and then it cuts back to 2023. So, there's a lot of individual moments in there that kind of expands this 20-year time period. And it was just interesting to see the characters age, and it's heartbreaking again. Frank gets sick, and I don't exactly know what illness he had, but I believe in the video game, from what I remember, again, YouTube Let's Plays, he was infected and then killed himself. And but this is a bit of a different take. I mean, it's a very different episode, like I said, but it's very different from the video game in terms of, I believe Frank probably had cancer or something. I don't think he wasn't infected by one of the infected. And it was just heartbreaking, man. I mean, whoa. Again, I haven't felt this way about something in a while, a movie or TV show, and this episode is super special overall. And I was a bit worried at first because I was kind of sad they didn't do a cold open and do a flashback, but because the last two episodes did have flashbacks, but in this episode, we do get flashbacks all throughout the episode. I mean, the majority of the episode is, of course, Bill and Frank. I mean, there's still Joel and Ellie a little bit, especially towards the beginning of the episode and then towards the end. But the middle, I mean, this is a long episode as well. It's about an hour and 15 minutes, which is just a little bit less than the runtime for the premiere. But, it's a movie, basically. This episode's a movie, and it's amazing. I mean, it really is amazing. Again, I don't know for sure if this is like my favorite episode of the show yet because it's just so vastly different from the other two in terms of just pretty much everything. I mean, when you have Joel and Ellie on screen, it feels like, oh yeah, this is The Last of Us. But like again, with stuff with Bill and Frank, doesn't really feel like The Last of Us. And that's not a bad thing. I want to get that clear right out the gates. It's not a bad thing that most of this episode didn't really feel like The Last of Us. It just kind of felt like its own contained story, as I said earlier. But it's just so vastly different from the other two episodes that it really is interesting to think about. And it's honestly hard to compare the three episodes. I mean, it's just... Well, I mean, I think it's easier to compare the first two episodes. But yeah, it's just very different. And I'll be very curious to see what people's thoughts are on this episode. It was pretty magnificent, I gotta say. My mind's kind of blown right now. Again, don't know for sure if it's the best episode, but I like it for different reasons. I mean, the first two episodes, they feel like I don't want to say stereotypical, but this one is just very unique. It's very different. It's trying to do something different a little bit, and I just love Bill and Frank's relationship. It was so incredibly wholesome. I almost cried a little bit. I'm surprised I didn't end up crying, but and Joel and Ellie, by the end of this episode, they're on the road. They got Bill's car. They're going to Wyoming not to get Tommy, but, to meet up with him. And then maybe one of the Firefly, yada, yada, yada. The story is afoot, and the story progresses, and it's great stuff. I mean, that's my thoughts on the episode. It was good. And I'm just curious to see what you guys have to say about this episode. So please, down in the comments below, what are your guys' thoughts on this episode? Very interested to find out. I'm sure most people pretty much enjoyed it for the most part, but we'll see. It's very different. It's very different, I feel like. And it will be interesting to see what people have to say about it. But anyways, let me hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you guys liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.